Welcome, Realtors. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Henderson, Jr. I'm a Realtor and from Charleston, South Carolina, and serve as NAR Federal Political Coordinator for Congresswoman Nancy Mace.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Lyles, and I'm from Columbia, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the South Carolina Realtors this year. We're honored to have Congresswoman Nancy Mace with us and thank her for her leadership in Washington, D.C. and her support of the real estate industry and home ownership.
And thank you so much and thank you so much, guys, for having me on today as well. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Morris. May is this time of year. We all look forward to attending the NAR Legislative Meetings in the nation's capital. But due to the coronavirus, we're conducting these meetings virtually again. It's one of my favorite Realtor meetings, and I hate that we can't be together, but we now have the opportunity to share our discussion with all 26,000 Realtors in our state. For our members who are watching, I hope our conversation today inspires you to attend the next year's meeting, which is always a great time, I'll throw in. Hopefully we'll be back in Washington.
Me too, Dan. Did you know that normally about 125 Realtors from South Carolina attend those meetings? Now we get to share that experience with all of our members. We know that the Congresswoman is on a tight schedule, so let's go ahead and get started.
Congresswoman Mace, thanks for being with us today. And before we jump into real estate questions, can you give us an update on your family? Now, how have y'all been over the last 12 months?
We're doing well.
Can I throw into my two cents? How are you doing since we had breakfast at Waffle House 3 weeks ago?
Oh goodness! Well, the days are better now. Now that kids are generally today they're off doing virtual school, but generally speaking, they're back in school now 5 days a week. So I got to tell you, that's been the biggest change in the last couple of weeks, and it's more than a welcome change. And I know for those out there that support themselves in the real estate industry and the real estate community, many of us moms and dads are very happy to see schools reopen 5 days a week like I am. It's very stressful to work at home and to have to educate your kids at home. It's been a very challenging year from that perspective. So hats off to the state and our school districts for getting our kids back in school, because we know it's safe when you put in specific safety precautions and health precautions. Our kids are safe at school.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad. I too am glad to be getting back to some sort of normalcy. We're back to 5 days a week, and my girls are back in school, and it sure is nice to have some normalcy there. Congresswoman Mace, as the U.S. continues to recover from the pandemic, Realtors are monitoring a number of issues that are impacting this nation's homeowners, the real estate industry, and the health of our mortgage market, and American consumers everywhere. There are 9.5 million jobs in the real estate, rental, and leasing industry, and every 2 home sales generate 1 job in this country. The issues that matter to our industry matter to our nation, and they will play a critical role in America's economic recovery.
You're absolutely correct, More. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying yes. Is that a question?
Well, no, it's not actually.
Is it Dan's turn?
Dan.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad to be getting back to normal. If you don't think things are back to normal in our area, just come to Shem Creek any night of the week. You're absolutely correct, Morris. Throughout the pandemic, the residential real estate market has had a positive economic impact on homeowners, communities, and the economy. However, access to residential real estate market has been severely limited by a historic 50-year record shortage of affordable homes available for purchase. What can Congress do to address affordable housing shortage in this country? And also, Congresswoman Mace, before you got on, Nick was asking me what I did, and I was talking about affordable rental deal I was working on too. That's really not a tax credit deal. It was creating affordable rentals for our area too. So it's not just sales, it's also the rental market Charleston's got the highest rents above Atlanta and Charlotte right now in the Southeast, I think.
I believe it too. And what is our average home sale now? Is it above 350? It's well above 250 now. What is the average home
Yeah, it's
sale in
way
our
up.
market?
It's like about around 350.
I mean,
400.
just in the last 5 years, home sales, I mean, it was always ticking up, but COVID-19 really exponentially fast forwarded the increase in value, the expense of not only building housing, but also to buy or rent housing. And so, you know, in talking to many different stakeholders, whether that is builders, developers, real estate agents, families and individuals who are buying homes, there's so much, there's so many challenges right now, and that could be supply chain issues driving up prices when you're building a home. Lumber is through the roof. Resin also is something that's very hard to find. And so, and when we talk about the different chips now, because every appliance you have has a digital chip in it or computer chip in it. All these things, the shortages that we're having, the supply chain, are also driving up the cost of everything as well. Plus the migration from everyone from all over the country, primarily the Northeast, but they're really coming here from all over the nation, getting out of blue states and coming to a state that is more free, that is more open, and that has and provides more opportunities for people to work, live, and retire. And of course, we have beautiful scenery with being in the low country, and all of our beaches and rivers and shores are just spectacular. And so I know that about every 2 cars that I pass, or when I'm driving, sometimes I'm passing, sometimes I'm not, but when I am driving, are from out of state. And so we all see that each and every day right now. And there are different ways to help tackle, you know, the affordable housing shortage in our country. There's federal, there's state legislation, and there's local legislation at the county or even municipal level. Like, for instance, the city of Charleston has ordinances to incentivize developers to include a certain percentage of the multi-family, at least, units that they do build to be affordable housing. But oftentimes, as we've seen, is that really when those regulations are put in place, they're more of a hindrance than an opportunity. So one of the first things that we can do at the federal level is pass legislation that would streamline the permitting process, for one, meeting with different stakeholders. I know that has come up. The time that it takes for permitting to build is often slowed down and held up and made more expensive because of the government at every level of the government. I've actually co-sponsored legislation that would, that if you're applying for different types of permits, that it would then expire. If the government doesn't respond in a timely manner, 6 months, a year, whatever that may be, that then it expires, and the builder can go on and continue the project. I mean, we've got to have these, not only should there be incentives in place for those that are building or buying, et cetera, but also the federal government. We've got to treat the government more like a business, because that's the way they treat us, right? We need to hold them accountable as well. And so the more red tape that we can eliminate, the more homes that we can build. But until we figure out some of the supply chain issues, the cost of building homes are only going to continue to increase exponentially. Addressing the housing supply in America is as simple as removing the government from the process, or at least parts of the process, and then letting the industry get to work at it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. If more residential housing is made available as a part of our effort to improve the nation's infrastructure, opportunities to access the wealth building benefits of homeownership will increase alongside employment levels and economic activity. Indeed, a recent study estimates that the U.S. has developed an underbuilding gap of 5.5 million housing units over the last 20 years. This translates into a $4.4 trillion underinvestment in housing. Even relatively modest steps taken now to reduce this gap will unleash tremendous economic activity and create millions of new jobs. Realtors support the Bipartisan Housing Supply and Affordability Act and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. Can we count on your support for these bills?
I've got to read the bills, first of all. I don't want, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. I've been traveling quite a bit. Generally speaking, you know, tax credits, those are all good things for specific industries. But one of the things we've also got to remember is that these are also special carve-outs. And so one of the things I've been really focused on the last couple of weeks, because the Biden administration wants to increase taxes on everyone, we've got to make sure we put a stop to that. And then we find ways to equally lower taxes for everybody in every industry, in every way, shape, or form that we can. Because one of the greatest inhibitions to us in being able to grow the economy, grow jobs, grow an industry are not only the regulatory policy that's put in by the government at the federal, state, and local level, but then also the taxes that are also put on goods when we are buying or building. I think it's really important. So I generally talk about it as a broader conversation about the benefits, the huge benefits of, for instance, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act under the Trump administration and what that was able to do for industry. If you wanted a job, you had a job. And particularly in the Charleston market, our unemployment rate was 1.86%. And you didn't need the federal government to mandate a $15 minimum wage. Many people were already making that, even at fast food franchises. I talked to one franchise owner that owns dozens of fast food franchises. Their entry-level salary previous to COVID was $15 an hour, and they were about to get a raise to 20. Of course, COVID happened, many millions of Americans got laid off, but now we're seeing, in order to incentivize people to come back to work, you're seeing companies give wild signing bonuses. McDonald's is actually paying people to just show up for an interview, not even take the job. And so we're seeing a lot of ways that businesses are trying to get people back to work, and this is a great time to actually get a job to do that. I do want to touch on one thing that Dan mentioned with the rental market previous. I meant to touch on my first question about the rental market. Again, that's another area where government regulation, particularly at the state and local level, inhibits homeowners. So for example, you look at the short-term rental market space or Airbnb, VRBO space. There are many areas of different counties or cities where you're only able to do that. It's not across the board. Again, special carve-outs as opposed to allowing everybody to do it when they want. And in some cases, this helps people pay for their property taxes, perhaps doing short-term rental or room rentals would help somebody be able to pay their mortgage every month. It allows people to rent space out at short-term prices, which are oftentimes higher than maybe a long-term rental. And so there are many different ways that we can tackle some of these challenges, but oftentimes the number one factor in it is big government, always getting in the way of the smaller guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Congresswoman Mace, that was a great answer. Thank you. Let's not forget the importance of 1031 like-kind exchanges, something near and dear to my heart. Reserving this vital tool promotes liquidity, encourages additional investment, and helps small and minority-owned businesses expand and grow. Moreover, like-kind exchanges fill gaps in housing supply not covered by other incentives for development and affordable housing. Multi-family housing transactions represent 40% of the real estate like-kind exchanges, while single-family homes make up another significant portion. Limiting like-kind exchanges would increase the cost of rental houses and raise rents. So let's change the topics from taxes to independent contractors. The re-examination of independent contractor status has become an important, intense discussion. I'm sure you've heard of the PRO Act. Many of the new companies classified workers who had traditionally been viewed as employees as independent contractors. More than 87% of NAR's 1.4 million members are classified as independent contractors, most whom choose to be classified as such to benefit from greater freedom, flexibility, and autonomy to work as entrepreneurs. Are you supportive of the longstanding federal recognition of real estate professionals to operate as independent contractors?
Absolutely.
There's a lot at you right there.
Well, yeah, no, that's okay. And in fact, one of the reasons that I got my real estate license 6 or 7 years ago was because I was free to work for myself rather than work for somebody else and keep my own hours. And of course, having a strong sales pipeline meant that I could make what I wanted. If I didn't want to work as hard, I made less. And if I worked really hard, I could have a really good income and was able to work for myself. That was one of the biggest benefits of getting into real estate for me personally. And today, even though I am no longer able to do real estate as a member of Congress because it's a fiduciary service, I still have a license that is inactive and still have the realtor designation on my real estate license. And so that was the number one benefit of hopping into it. And I was surprised to hear about this, that the federal government would get to decide how you work. And being an independent contractor, I absolutely wholeheartedly would support any way to ensure that we keep that. And really surprised that the federal government would have any hand in that whatsoever on deciding how you would want to work. It's kind of crazy, but in general, I would support anything that would allow someone to work for themselves. I found that it can be, depending on where you are in your life and if you have a family and what your obligations are, that it could be a much better opportunity to get into work or get back to work if you're juggling a lot. I'm a mom and single mom, and real estate always provided me the opportunity to be able to take my kids to school, drop them off, pick them up, and then work in between. It was a great opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Mace. As stewards of the right to own, use, and transfer private property, our livelihoods and businesses as realtors depend upon an open housing market free from discrimination. Our economy, communities, and the American people suffer when discrimination and segregation artificially constrain homeownership and limit the intergenerational wealth it builds. Yet, more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, the homeownership rates for African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans continues to lag behind that of white Americans. What can Congress do to help this?
Well, there's been lots of talk about the wealth gap in America, but few mention that the quantifiable difference between the middle and lower classes is equity of ownership, of home ownership. By lifting the heavy hand of regulatory burdens at the federal, state, and local level, that would benefit the industry. We can help more low-income Americans access the credit that they need and deserve. But also, many of you know, if you're in the real estate market, particularly short-term rental market, when Airbnb was really new to our community, again, having these special carve-outs of where you can do it and where you can't do it really harmed many low-income families, particularly Black and brown communities. I mean, I grew up in Charleston, like many here today, and when you grow up here, the difference between rich and poor is literally Black and white in many of our communities. And I remember when the short-term rental market was very new, and they had only certain areas where you could do it, and it was hurting these low-income families that wanted to utilize Airbnb to rent a room or to rent their space short-term to help pay for some of their property expenses. And so instead of being able to do that, many had to sell their homes and move away. And I hope today that has improved for many of those families. But again, unintended consequences of government trying to jump in and regulate something to protect some other special interest, in that case, hotels, for example, we then hurt many of these low income of many of these communities too. And so the other thing we've got to focus on too when we're talking about African American communities is the lack of education and what we can do. There's equality in how fair people are treated, but also this equity in education, so that those children are better educated and better equipped to get better jobs and to be able to be future homeowners in our communities as well. And that's something we cannot take for granted, and we've got to continue to address, recognize, and continue to work on.
Thank you.
The Biden administration recently introduced the American Families Plan. We appreciate the administration's efforts to lead our nation on a path to economic recovery after the COVID-19 health pandemic, and also their most recent proposals to address our nation's longstanding infrastructure and transportation challenges. But NAR believes there are several proposals in the president's plan that will negatively impact economic growth, really more than several, and depress commercial real estate. What is your take on the American Families Plan?
Well, it's interesting because the Biden administration had to rename their infrastructure plan to like the American Jobs Plan, Family Plan. I don't even know what it's called anymore, because when it was just too big and it had nothing to do with infrastructure, and they couldn't sell it to the American people. And we spent as a nation about 3.5 trillion on COVID relief in 2020. And we started off this year with half of that in the first quarter, in the first 100 days of this year, with the $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan. And what we ended up doing, and we called it before, and it's the reason I voted against it, but the increase in federal unemployment, particularly in the stimulus checks, all we did was pay millions of Americans to stay home. And guess what? When you pay millions of Americans to stay home and not go to work, they're going to stay home and not go to work. And previous to all of this, so we're state of South Carolina, statewide as a whole, Charleston, Low Country's been hurt a little harder hit because of the hits we took earlier this year to tourism, hospitality, hotel industry, et cetera. But by and large, overall, the state average of unemployment for the last several months has been hovering just over 4%. In the middle of a global pandemic, the hardest pandemic, worst challenge we've had in our generation, and probably for many generations, we as a state have been hovering over 4%. And the only reason we're not below that is because the federal government continues to incentivize unemployment. Now, just last Thursday, we saw Governor McMaster decide that in June 1st, the state will no longer take the federal subsidized unemployment part. Now, if you are on unemployment, you can still get the state unemployment checks that you may need if you've been laid off, but the federal dollars are going to go away on June 1st. And I believe when this goes away, there's going to be a statistically significant number of people who've been sitting on the sidelines ready to go back to work. And right now, before that rush happens, this is the time to, if you want to get back to work, if you know anyone, to negotiate better wages, better salary, better benefits, because companies are really struggling. Come June 1st, when that federal benefit goes away, I believe wages and salaries, there'll be more job opportunities, but I believe they'll go slightly down. And so if you're looking for signing bonus, now is the time to go get it before June, before that rush of people that get off unemployment want to come back to work. So we've got to stop incentivizing this. And what we've seen at the federal level is that folks want to double down on this. Last Friday, we saw the jobs report. Economists were expecting 1 million in new jobs in the first quarter. It was roughly 250,000, give or take, a quarter of what was expected. And the reason this is happening is because we're paying people to stay home as opposed to getting them back to work. So the best thing we can do is to turn down the federal unemployment checks, to cease on the stimulus checks, unless it's for someone who's truly, truly, truly in need. But the opportunities are there. I know the other day I sat in an hour and a half of traffic on the Don Holt. I'm sure some of you were there with me, but we are finally back to work, and we just got a little bit. A small parts will make a big difference here. And I believe June 1st, we're going to see a totally different Low Country as people get back to work as well.
Thank you, Representative Mace. Before we go, we've got time for one final question. Over the last 12 months, many of us have spent more time with our family, learned to cook, or even learned to speak a new language. What was your favorite COVID pastime while we were locked down?
Board games with my kids, everything from Monopoly to relearning and loving Clue to chess is the latest one. And also getting outside and walking. We do a lot of walks together to get steps in and get moving and get exercise. COVID has really hurt many of us, not only mentally, but physically with our health. And so getting outside and taking walks with the kids or riding our bikes, was a one, but also that family time, that quality time, I'll never get it back. And it's been very, very much enjoyable and something we're trying to continue to do.
It has. It's been a nice break most of the time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Mace, for being here today. And on behalf of Dan and our 26,000 commercial and residential members, the South Carolina Realtors, thank you again for your diligence, your leadership, as we all look forward to putting the pandemic behind us. Please convey our appreciation. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And please convey our appreciation to your staff and to all you do in keeping us informed and keeping us part of the conversation in Washington.
And I just want to say thank you to both of you and the entire association. I love being a member, and I love seeing everybody. We have a great community here in the Low Country, and also getting feedback and hearing from everybody and what's on their mind. And I'm happy to continue to keep that door open and keep the relationship going. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.